In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbartis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies and knights, to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host from right here in Pittsburgh, across town, Chad Robinson. How you doing, sir?
I'm excited to be on the show today and definitely excited not to be hosting.
All right. You know what? I detect that's as excited as Chad gets, for those who don't know. I mean, I'm feeling the energy off of you, and I'm feeding off of it. You know what we need for this energy?
We need a new guest.
First-time guest, that's right. We have Kathy Hoskinson. Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I am so excited to be here talking with the two of you about an 80s movie, one of my favorite 80s movies.
I am excited as well. Now, Kathy, just tell people at home you've got an upcoming project that you want to tell people about. Let us know where we will soon be able to hear more from you.
It's a podcast about the complexities of human behavior, with a focus on mental health. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm an armchair psychologist. I'm completely a lay person, so I'm not going to approach this from from a position of expertise, but going to talk about people, the way we behave, the way we act, how mental health issues are a part of pretty much every person's daily life, and just explore it with kindness and compassion, and also a little bit of analysis. And I think it's a topic that people want to hear about, and they don't always want to maybe sit there and listen to a psychologist talk about it. They want to hear it from somebody who like them is exploring it from a layperson's perspective.
I think that's good to put it out there too, so people don't forget about it. It's, like you said, everybody knows somebody who's affected by it.
We all are, yeah, exactly. And I think if we just tweak our perspective a little bit, I think a lot of what is plaguing us these days will be a little easier to get through.
Worked for Dr. Fraser Crane.
Right, except for I won't be the doctor, I'll be the, and then I'm going to fall back on that, well, I'm not an expert, line anytime I need to.
That takes a lot of pressure off. Yeah, for sure.
Yep, sure does.
Now, Kathy, as we get into this is a movie. This is Valentine's Day season. This is a movie that has a great romance line in it. What is the best date movie that you would recommend for a new couple, or just for any couple in general? What's a good date movie?
Well, okay, date movie. Now you got me, because I'm probably going to go old school, and only because I'm going back to the 80s to recommend The Big Easy with Dennis Quaid and Ellen Barkin.
Okay.
Because it's sexy, and it was a movie that I saw with a boyfriend that I had at the time. And it didn't even get, it got good reviews, but it was also, people like to make fun of Dennis Quaid's Cajun accent. It wasn't that great. It wasn't spot on by any means.
So it was no Rob Schneider in Waterboy then.
Right. So that aside, though, it actually got good reviews otherwise, and it was such a sexy movie, and it was a great movie to see with my boyfriend at the time, and I have very fond memories of that, of watching that with him.
Big Easy. That's a good suggestion.
The Big Easy, baby.
Now, what is the last movie that you saw?
So I haven't been to the theater in a while, but I guess if we're talking about, in the age of this pandemic, watching a new movie means most of the time watching it on, some streaming platform. I saw The King of Staten Island, that new Pete Davidson movie.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that?
I did. It's not my normal go-to type of movie, but I'm very interested. Pete Davidson obviously has been very open about his struggles with mental health, and this is, I think it was advertised as being sort of a semi-biographical, and definitely about him, this young man, this character, struggling with grief, in being in a time of his life where he just didn't know what he was doing or where he was going to go next, and so that piqued my interest, and I wasn't disappointed, I have to say. And if you're a Pete Davidson fan, then you definitely need to see it.
I do need to see it. Now, Chad, what's the last movie you saw?
So it's Valentine's Day season. So, of course, I've been hitting the horror movies very hard. And Session 9 was the latest movie that I saw with David Caruso. A very unique movie. I liked it a lot. It was set in an old asylum. They were asbestos cleaners. And man, it caught me off guard. It just made one of those lists of, hey, you should see this movie if you haven't. And that was probably one of my favorites, along with 1981's Prowler. That was kind of a goofy slasher, but I just, somehow, that didn't make it on my radar. Very happy with them.
All right. They're not all winners, so my last one was not really a winner. I've been picking up some 2011 movies off of Netflix, and I watched New Year's Eve.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
I thought Valentine's Day was okay, and so I thought this would be equally okay. But this was a number of steps down below that, and I did not necessarily have a great time with it, even though there were a number of people I liked in it. It's one of those scattershot stories, so it's not as good as Love Actually or even Valentine's Day. So. I can't recommend it, but I did see it.
Well, you gotta love Gary Marshall, right? I mean, and this was, I think, the last movie he ever made, right? So I agree with everything you said. My favorite part of that movie was the closing sequence when they were all dancing to that Pink song.
Mm-hmm. Raise Your Glass.
Yeah. Yes, Raise Your Glass. Like that was the best part of the movie, that closing sequence.
That does sound like the hecklers from the Muppets saying, like, you know what my favorite part of the movie was? No, the end credits.
Yes, that's where my mind went. I was like, you need to fast forward about 2 more minutes, and then that's my favorite part when it was over.
Oh,
Stedler and Waldorf are my heroes. So
they are indeed, yes.
Sorry, Gary Marshall, All right, so we're gonna do a much better movie than So we're gonna do a much better movie than New Year's Eve here today. We're doing.
Agreed.
Yes, we're gonna do. Chad, what is today's movie?
We are doing 1988's Working Girl.
That's right. This grosses $11.9 million in the box office. It comes on 86th in the year. Not necessarily the highest. It comes in just behind Casual Sex with a question mark. I think of Anchorman with a question mark on there. Like, who put the question mark in there?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Yeah. Casual Sex? And then it comes in ahead of Bloodsport, which, if you want to hear a podcast on Bloodsport, check out Retro Movie Roundtable episode 44. Nothing pairs together like Working Girl and Bloodsport, if I could say so. That's a 2-pack made in heaven. The number one movie from 1988 was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. IMDb gives Working Girl an 8.6. The critics of Rotten Tomatoes give 84% to Working Girl. The audience doesn't like it as much. They give it a 67%. That's surprisingly out of balance. Now, the Academy Awards actually gave some attention to this. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song by Carly Simon. And the Academy Award nominations, it got 5 of those for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress again for Joan Cusack and Sigourney Weaver. And the Golden Globes actually did win 4 of them. So it came away with some pretty good hardware here. It got Best Motion Picture, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Original Song. Amazing takeaway from the Golden Globes there. And then 2 more nominations for Best Screenplay and Best Director. And it had 3 BAFTA nominations. AFI's 100 Years of Passions put this at number 91. Here we go. Kathy, obviously it sounds like you've seen Working Girl. Tell us your background with it. When did you first see it and what was it like?
First, I have to interject, and I'm probably violating a couple of guest protocols here, but this is sort of the tricky thing about when you have a movie that's released in December of the year of its release, because your box office data doesn't. And I'm a child of the 80s, right? Full disclosure, I came of age in the 80s. This was a solid hit, a really popular movie in the 80s. But the box office data is actually, if you combine 1988 with 1989, because it was released on December 21st of 1988, but it ran into the spring of 1989. It had a worldwide gross of 103 million, which was a solid hit.
That makes so much more sense.
Yeah, solid hit for 31 years ago. And if you kind of combine the 2 years, it ran into the spring before it finally ended its first release run. It had a rank of about 11 for movies released in 88, even though it played at fewer theaters than others in the top 20 that year. So big hit. and definitely the hit, the career-making role for Melanie Griffith. And to answer your question, I did see it in the theater with some friends when it came out. And of course, we all, we couldn't stop, drooling over our Harrison Ford, right? But we were all just so impressed with Melanie Griffith. This was the definition of a star-making vehicle for Melanie Griffith. I mean, prior to this movie, she was, she was known. She was the body in Brian De Palma's Body Double movie, and she was obviously known for being she was a Tippi Hedren's daughter, and sort of a little bit of a wild child of the late 70s, early 80s. So she was known but not known that well. But this movie just skyrocketed her into, just A-list status. And by the way, she deserved every bit of that. Oh, by the way, for all of you guys listening, this is Dakota Johnson's mom we're talking about. For all of you, millennials or Generation Zs, this is Dakota Johnson's mom.
That probably does mean more to people than saying related to Tippi Hedren. So you're right.
Right. Yeah, they're all like, what is she talking? First of all, what is she talking about? Who is Tippi Hedren?
And Tippy's a very strange name. I've never heard it. No.
Yeah, so.
Dakota actually steals the speech from this movie, and it's in 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, she does. She does take part of it. And by the way, did I say Brian La Palma? Help me out. It was Brian De Palma. She was known again prior to this star-making turn. She was the body in Body Double.
You're fact-checking the box office numbers. You're fact-checking yourself. This is great. We can really loosen up and be really inaccurate tonight, Chad.
That is no change for me, sir. Just wild speculation here.
I can't help. The problem is I'm a professional analyst, not like psychological analyst. I wish I had gone in that direction. No, I'm a professional data analyst. So
yeah. Me too.
Yeah, so.
We take opposite ends of the spectrum. So we prepare for facts that may not be facts, but everything is true on the internet.
That's right. Well, or just prepare for data you don't want to know about or you didn't ask for, right?
Garbage in, garbage out.
So how long has it been since you have seen Working Girl? Was it fun to come back to it now?
First of all, I always see Working Girl. I mean, it's one of those movies that if it's on, it can steal me. If I just happen to have the TV on and it's a Saturday and I'm not doing anything, it can capture me. So I couldn't tell you the amount of times I've seen Working Girl.
Okay, so you never put it down for long then.
Well, I don't seek it out, but it's such a great movie, and it's always on like one of the Stars or Showtime or HBO retro channels. Once every couple of years it'll have a good run. I think it's having a run right now, and when it has one of its runs on any channel that I have access to and I come across it, it sucks me in.
That's a wonderful quality of a movie to just draw you in, from midpoint. It's going to be different movies for different people, but when a movie hits that way for somebody, it is special. So I'm glad to hear that it's that way for you. Chad, had you seen Working Girl before?
No, and as we've discussed, I've seen an appalling amount of romantic comedies. This just wasn't one of them, and I think it's because, my wife and I were both born in 84. This isn't listed as one of the classics that you have to see. And so it just fell through the gaps of, she's made me see all of the big ones. But this one, nope. I saw Harrison Ford on the list. I was like, sure, I'll give this a whirl.
Yeah, and you got Sigourney Weaver, so you got Indiana Jones and Ripley.
Yes.
Yes.
Can't go wrong.
This is my first time with this one as well. I'm a huge Harrison Ford fan, and it's one of those gaps in my Harrison Ford library that I had just not gotten to. And there was even an episode of Bob's Burgers that had a number of Working Girl references because the kids at school were putting on a musical play performance of Working Girl, and there were a number of jokes made throughout the episode alluding to this, and I didn't get them. And now I can go back and enjoy Bob's Burgers having watched this now. So I'm excited that I enjoyed this movie, and I am excited that I can enjoy Bob's Burgers on that episode more now as well. So, but I did have a good time with this.
Oh my God. And it's got so many just great quotes coming from it, great quotes, and a lot of great cameo type scenes,
Chad, I didn't get a chance to ask you. I'm a softie, so I tend to, even for a guy, I tend to have a soft spot for a well done romance movie or a rom-com, but you did not say. I'm guessing you're tougher on this genre than I am. How did this one go down for you?
we kind of have divergent opinions on romantic comedies. The ones I like, you really don't, and vice versa. So you tend to like the more serious ones, and I tend to like the more goofy ones. This one kind of trended towards the more serious. It definitely had some important themes. When I'm watching with my wife goes for the brain dead ones. So this actually, it didn't go over as well as I had hoped for her. And I think that affected my enjoyment a little bit. I still enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but it probably isn't cracking my top 10.
Top 10 for romance movies.
Yes. Oh, no, that's, yeah, that list is hard to crack on the actual top 10.
All right, so we will be back after these messages, and we will spoil Working Girl. So if you haven't seen Working Girl, you're going to want to go check the movie out and then come back after this. There are spoilers that lie ahead.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
All right, we're back, and this is your final warning. There are spoilers that lie ahead. Now, Chad, for those who haven't seen Working Girl since 1988, tell us about Working Girl starring Harrison Ford, Sigourney Weaver, Melanie Griffith.
Love to. A smart working-class girl named Tess McGill, played by Melanie Griffith, quits her job as a stockbroker's secretary after being poorly treated by her chauvinistic bosses. Her staffing agency gives her one last chance and places her with a female associate in the mergers and acquisitions department by the name of Catherine Parker, who's played by the conniving Sigourney Weaver. Tess, even though she's just Catherine's assistant, steps out of her lane and suggests a merger deal to Catherine, who informs her the idea just isn't really feasible. However, on a ski trip, Catherine injures her leg, and Tess, while humiliatingly house-sitting, discovers Catherine actually liked her idea and wanted to use it as her own. So Tess, not realizing how long it takes for someone to recover from a broken leg, decides to move ahead with the merger plans herself and contacts Jack Traynor, played by Indiana Jones himself, Harrison Ford. She gets blackout drunk off of 2 drinks at a party and unknowingly has a man carry her back to his apartment where she wakes up undressed next to him.
She took pills, too.
Yes, she took antihistamines.
No, it was Valium, I think. Sorry, fact-checking. I'm fact-checking again, excuse me.
Yes. Yeah, that scene really hasn't aged very well. But anyways, at the pitch meeting, she realizes Jack was the man that she woke up next to, and he assures her nothing romantic happened. The two of them work together to close a deal between the Trask Company and a local radio station. As Tess fakes it until she makes it, she and Jack crash a wedding in order to secure a meeting with Trask. Eventually, Catherine figures out what's going on and interrupts the closing, completely humiliating Tess, who leaves the meeting in shame. As she's cleaning out her desk the next day, Tess bumps into Jack and the clients, and she gets one last shot to convince Jack this was her idea, not Catherine's. Jack lets Tess and Mr. Trask talk in a private elevator. She shares how she arrives at her idea. Mr. Trask then asks Catherine, as they exit the elevator, how she came up with her idea. Catherine can't even come up with a lie. So she's promptly fired, and Tess is given an entry-level, air quote, position. She finds a woman in an office the next day and assumes she will be Tess's new boss. However, the woman, Alice, informs her that Tess is actually the boss and that she will be her new secretary. Tess calls her best friend, Cindy, to tell her she's made it as Let the River Run plays in the background. We receive a triumphant shot of people working in cubicles. Ah, the American dream.
80s corporate America at its finest.
Yeah, it's like New Jerusalem, and it's just cubicles. I'm sad.
I was gonna say working environments have come a long way since then, for sure. But anyway, so Kathy, tell us about, what did you like about the story of Working Girl?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that it demonstrates that if you can get over these roadblocks that are put in the way of people who maybe, are of a different class, right? Or a different station in life. Yes, I mean, it sort of promotes a little bit of like being sneaky. I mean, there's a line that says, you can bend the rules plenty when you're at the top, but you can't get to the top without bending the rules.
I love
right?
that line. Yeah.
Yeah, the one at the end. But, I think it also sends that message but I think it also sends the message of, look, bottom line, she was smart, she was savvy, she knew her job, she knew her business, and that raw ability was going to be what ultimately, combined with her gumption, would get her out of her station and into one where she was appreciated and one that she deserved.
Yeah, this one often gets categorized predominantly as a romantic comedy, but I mean, Harrison Ford's character doesn't enter this movie until 35 minutes in. I actually think there's something even greater in play here. This is an underdog story. Like this is like in the vein that so many other movies have a character who's just completely out of their league, but then they completely use sheer determination, willpower to overcome, in this case, even some pretty mean people who try to push her down. Whether it be, it's a tough place for a woman in the 80s in corporate America. It's still tough, but I mean, it's especially tough in the 80s at that point to try and move through a male-dominated field. And on top of that, she doesn't necessarily have the most impressive educational requirements. She's getting a late start. And, she doesn't even necessarily have the support of her own community back home, who don't necessarily view this as, what women do. And that comes across pretty clear in her other relationships with her friends, as well as her, terrible boyfriend. So,
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of representation of why those stereotypes were so persistent. And like, to your point, I mean, her friends, her especially her best buddy Sin, what did she say? This is, you're out of your league, and you shouldn't even try to be, right? Why not?
Yeah, what was it? Just because I put on a bra doesn't make me Madonna or something like that?
Yeah. And all I would, all you, if you're hearing that, you're thinking to yourself, or at least I would, well, if I can sing and dance, why can't I be Madonna, right? I mean, that's, it goes back to ability and, not accepting your station and not being, relegated to some stereotype.
Yeah, this was an interesting one for me because I have similar life experience to what Tess went through, where I wanted more in my entry-level job. So I would learn and just start doing other people's jobs. And I actually got called into the office. And even though I was good at doing other people's jobs, I got probably the most depressing speech of my entire career was, "You're a cog, and a cog needs to do one thing. And you need to do that one thing well and let the other cogs do their one thing to keep things working." I'm like, but other people are bad at their jobs and I'm better at it.
Yeah, and I think the reason this movie plays so well in 2021, and I believe that it does, even though it's definitely an 80s movie, and we're going to have to talk about hair and makeup in a minute.
Oh, we will.
But
Russell will. Yeah.
but the reason I think this plays so well is because, nowadays, you want to have a radio show, you create a podcast, and no one's going to tell you shouldn't. You want to make money, create your own internet business, and no one's going to question your education background. They're going to look, they're going to look at your results. And so it's, we live in a results driven society because the playing field has been leveled a little bit. That's what Tess is trying to say. Why I'm just as good, I'm in fact better, if you think about when she was, the opening scene when she was working for the stockbrokers, that Dave Lutz, the pimp, right?
Yeah, with a tiny peepee.
You're right. It could be argued she was a better stockbroker than they were. And so her argument seems to be, what difference does it make yes, if I were entry level, or if I hadn't proven myself with all this professional experience, then yes, you could say, well, you got your degree from, this small school, and you're competing with people who have a degree from Harvard. But regardless of any of that, I've been in the business, and my results should speak for themselves at this point. She was defiantly saying, why shouldn't my results speak for themselves? And I think that's why that plays so well, because in the 80s, they didn't, and especially not in not in Manhattan, in the world of finance. But now more so than ever, they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the first draft of the story, Catherine Parker was a man, which would just dramatically change the whole feeling of this movie.
How was the Jack Trainer relationship supposed to work?
Well, clearly that wouldn't have even been there. So, It's that's one of those things that blows my mind. I can't imagine this movie going that direction. So I'm glad they made that change.
Yeah, and what they did by making, and I hadn't heard that actually, so I thank you for giving me access to this additional trivia. But I think that having Sigourney Weaver play the boss, because there was a lot of, how women were treated back then. I mean, great small part by Kevin Spacey playing just the sleaziest sleazoid, right? I mean, talk about foreshadowing. But anyway, I think that having Catherine Parker be the younger, successful woman boss, younger by what, a month, added the whole, it wasn't just always a battle of the sexes, or you know the woman tries to climb out of the basement into the man's world, because it was that, definitely, and it was that there was quite a bit of that, but there was also just class warfare, basically. And having a female boss allowed the focus to be on not battle of the sexes, but class warfare.
I'm guessing Sigourney or Catherine Parker was lying there. Like, she says she's 30. She was 39 at the age of this filming, but it seems in character for Catherine to lie about that type of stuff.
No, good point.
Yeah.
I wonder that. Yeah.
Sigourney's one of those ones, kind of like Jamie Lee Curtis. It's like you never look whatever age they're casting you for.
She's got great bones.
Yeah, although to her credit, though, she looked 30. I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, I think that's an interesting take, but I don't know that it was necessarily meant to for us to think that she was lying. I think that she really was a month younger than Tess. I just think, I think the fact that Sigourney Weaver was older just is a testament to how great she looks and looked back then.
Yeah, the 80s hairstyles just don't do anyone a favor, too. I know Russell cited Courtney Cox quite a bit of she looks younger when she changes out of the 80s, early 90s hairstyle. Like, you lose 5-6 years.
Yeah, like you got older, but you somehow feel younger. Like it just, and it's not just the hair. It's, shoulder pads or certain types of, again, 80s corporate America, I think there's a mentioning of wanting to come across as masculine to hold your own in this world. Fashion was doing some unkind things as well. There were some mullets that we saw in the picture. Alec Baldwin definitely hitting the mullet. But I'm going to hold off of some of these aesthetic things here and just focus on, I really, really like Tess as a character. I mean, just the resourceful, smart gem of a worker that's competent, and I love people who just stick it to the system and they don't take crap off of people. So I like that she knew that she was going to get in trouble, but she wasn't going to be walked all over. And I highly relate to that character from that standpoint. I'm sure Chad, who's been with me since 7th grade, can think of many times when I didn't necessarily take to authority very well.
Yeah, usually not to lucrative positions, but more to detention.
Yes, I've frequented detention, but I didn't get walked all over. So. 4 strikes,
Russell.
you got your 4th strike. So,
well, it sounds like you probably were questioning the system. I think that was a big key to what made Tess so appealing, is that she, I mean, if you look at Sin, there was an acceptance there, right? She was more typical. There was just an acceptance. This is my station in life, and Tess just wasn't gonna, why does it have to be that? Why can't I be judged on my output? Period. Right? That was in the forefront of her mind, and as it should be. Judge me on what I can do.
Yeah, it's always baffled me in the corporate world. I've helped a couple people get positions, and I never cared about their degrees or whatever else. It was just aptitude. And the amount of bosses, even today, that still don't look at it. They look at, okay, well, they have this background and they have this. But if they don't have the aptitude, if they can't learn, the ceiling's so low for them. So Tess definitely had the aptitude. She was just raw.
Yeah. Structurally, from the plot standpoint, I love how this movie puts you on a roller coaster. It doesn't just kind of go on the typical thing of like, here's dreamy guy, here's an easily overcomable miscommunication that then like we're going to sink into the movie. Then there's going to be a montage and a big over the top action to win her back. This throws that template out completely. And/or that template hadn't been solidified at this point. This movie puts you on a good emotional roller coaster. Catherine is nice, and she seems to be rescuing Tess from this this world, and it seems like she's really excited about it, but she's a backstabber. But then she comes back from vacation and she seems to be on her side, and she actually casts doubt in Jack by saying that he takes people's ideas and, you know, he's got some real ethical problems and I was protecting you. And what we find out later is that Catherine's just realizing that she flubbed up and has overplayed her hand here, and Tessa's on to her, but she, you know, is still trying to take advantage of her, but we don't know that as an audience. Similarly, she's exposed and Catherine makes her look bad in front of everybody, and you just don't know, like, it doesn't seem like anything good could come of this. It's just an interesting thing. And even Jack seems to be, after he cheats on her and drops her, he gets his boat, you know, loan to come through. And I didn't quite get that at first. I guess it was a ferry boat that could get like profiting off of that. Was that kind of the notion off of that?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, and that's just, you're talking about not Jack, but it was the Alec Baldwin character.
Mick
Thank
gets
you,
his boat loan. I first thought, I was like, okay, so you can buy a boat. Like, you are a loser. But then later he's like, no, like, this is a boat and I'm going to make all this money. I'm sitting there going like, oh, I misunderstood. You're a fairy.
Well, yeah, but also, yeah, but here's the thing though. I think that whole dialogue, right? So all of that stuff, the Staten Island portion of the movie,
Yes.
right? You know, and showing her on the ferry was so critical, right? It's the you know, it's her transversing or whatever, going back and forth between these two worlds, one that is she comes from and wants to escape, and one that she wants to break into. And I think just you know, dialogue like that, where, you know, the biggest thing that ever happened to Mick, he's working class, right? He, you know, if he can get a loan, yes, to your point, it was a commercial boat. That was the whole point about it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm getting a loan for my, you know, speedboat so I can go,
I thought that at first.
you know, off of Martha's Vineyard and, you know, hang out with my. No. I mean, like he's working class, right? That's the point. And the fact that he could get a loan, a boat loan, that was akin to getting a business loan, right? And that's the biggest thing that happens to somebody out there, blue collar, working class. You know, you get a boat loan, you can, you know, you've got equipment now to run your business.
Right.
Spider-Man Homecoming has ruined all scenes with fairies involved for me, so I was just kind of waiting for Vulture or Iron Man to show up. Like, I like your analysis of the ferrying between two worlds, but here I am, teenage boy brain, just like, Marvel movies.
No, but and you were right about that. And I had that written down for some of my cinematography things. They make a real point of the fairy that she's entering this world that's not the world that she's from. But going back to this roller coaster that they put you on, she's fired, and she's at her low point when she drops all of her stuff. She's being humiliated. She's been sent out, and who knows what, she's lost her stability. Mick was actually somebody who would have provided stability in the world where she was from. So she's kind of out on her own, and the world that she's come from is going to kind of not have a lot of sympathy from her. And so this is the low point in this movie. It's not an intangible, stupid miscommunication that was easily overcomable by a phone call. This is a real life situation, and you really feel for her. Like, this is a real problem. She took a risk, and it seemingly blew up in her face. And what came through at the end was an unpredicted, perhaps even naive thing in 80s corporate America, but her male partner stood up for her and said, nope, this is her idea. And she gets the credit she actually deserves in the end. And somehow that's highly rewarding. So that's just a real emotional roller coaster that this movie puts you on. That's many cuts above your, I don't want to say brain dead romantic movies but I mean, this is a higher quality movie.
Oh my God, it totally is. I mean, look, you could argue. I mean, the whole argument that this is even classified as a rom-com is a separate argument altogether, right? Because all these quality, well-written, you know, character-driven movies that have substance, right, are oftentimes lumped into this chick flick / rom-com genre, because that's just how that's just how it works. You know, people think, oh, that's a movie only chicks will like, so it's obviously going to be a rom-com. But to your point, it's please, I mean, the romance is secondary. I mean, yeah, even in the end, does she get the guy? Yes, but it's almost secondary. She gets the job.
Right.
She gets over the roadblock. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we could spend probably half of this podcast talking about why, you know, this movie even being relegated as a rom-com is offensive. But that's for a different podcast. But yes, to your point, this is definitely not like a boilerplate boy meets girl, some contrived thing gets in the way of boy and girl living happily ever after. Roadblock is moved, boy and girl live happily ever after movie. It's just not anything like that.
Yeah.
It's much more
I
layered.
will say that firing scene kind of took me out. Like, that was a very 80s scene. Nowadays, after, the phrase going postal, they don't let you back in the building if you are fired. You don't get to go and talk to your coworkers and clean out your desk at your own pace. There is someone, if they let you back in, you are escorted by a member of HR.
That's post 9/11, man. That's post 9/11. This is the 80s. That hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, it was a very 80s.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just think about it. She didn't actually work for Trask, right? So she was in mergers and acquisition at a firm that specialized in that type of corporate takeover type situation, or mergers and acquisitions specifically. So what it showed, Trask, what it showed was that no matter who you are, you're only as good as your last good deal. I'm the deal. I'm the big wig corporate client whose company you're trying to merge with another one. And so I'm going to have you fired versus I'm going to fire you, right? Because that wasn't her boss. It was her client.
Going back to this original script. So Kevin Wade's original script, where Catherine was a man, Jack is disillusioned and superficially of the business that he's in. In fact, in the final act of the story, he doesn't stand up for Tess in the elevator scene at all. It's Trask himself who decides to listen to her, and afterwards he berates himself for not doing it and says that I should have stood up for you. Tess realizes he's become someone that he doesn't like, and the film ends with him quitting the industry and leaving New York to go back and get in touch with himself while she advances. I don't like anything about this original script.
Yeah, I don't either.
This is a whole nother movie that's nowhere near as good, and it doesn't finish out as well, it doesn't start as well, and you lose the love triangle too, because I really like how what a fun thing to realize that this woman that Jack needs to cut it off with is actually Catherine, Sigourney Weaver's character, who's injured, and when he says she was in a ski accident, you're just like, oh wow.
I mean, come on now. New York has how many million people? Seriously? I get there's some connection.
It's not a coincidence as much as you would think, because remember back when Tess is at Catherine's house. Now, she believed Catherine when Catherine said, look, I floated your idea around. No, but I couldn't get anybody excited, but I tried for you, right? So then she accepts that and says, okay, well, we'll try again next time, right? So then she finds the letter on Catherine's personal computer at home. And wasn't that memo or that letter, she said, don't go to Tess on this. We're going to, just personal memo to me. Don't have Tess type this up for you. This is something you're going to type up yourself and send to Jack Trainer, right?
Yeah, it was.
So the memo was addressed to, I think that's why Tess thought to go to Jack in the first place. So I think that there's, the connection was already there. It wasn't just pure coincidence that Jack happened to also be, Catherine's love interest.
Yeah, and a lot of dumb rom-com movies would make the whole premise of like Harrison Ford not saying that he was Jack Trainer into the whole movie, and this was just but a mere turn. In this movie, it was an interesting point where he doesn't share his name, and we as the audience start to get the idea that we know what's going on, and it's kind of fun. But I mean, this is the first third of the movie where she doesn't realize it's him, and now she's in an awkward position, and it's so much more complex than that. And so again, this is good writing. It came out of a horrible first draft, but what they finished with was great.
Yeah.
See, I thought that scene was very awkward because Jack was pretty much implying, hey, I don't want to tell you my name because then we're going to have to do business. If I don't tell you my name, maybe we can have sex. And that was just such a strange thing at a business. I mean, maybe it works if you're...
I think he's a little more gentlemanly than that. I think. They're portraying him to be so... he could have slept with her when she was passed out, but he didn't.
Well, no. I mean, in the future, he didn't know that was going to happen. But it was clear, like, if I don't tell you my name, maybe we can hook up. And maybe that works if you're Harrison Ford, but... I just come from my work.
Well, I think it was because, I think what's great about the Jack Trainer character is that I mean, apart from just being Harrison Ford and he's appealing, just so physically appealing, the appeal is that his character is ethical, right? And it was established that way from the start. I think the whole thing with "I don't want to tell you my name" is because he said, you know, when he first saw her from across the room, the visual, right? So she's in this, gorgeous sort of
$6,000. It's not even leather.
right, but high end, right? Yeah. But she's in this high end, very beautiful dress, right? Not a, like a sleazy club dress, but a really nice high end cocktail dress surrounded by all these drab, gray, olive drab type business suits. He looks at her from across the room and in that scene, without him saying a word, this man, he's in a rut. He's in a big corporate rut and he just is so tired, and the background conversation is, the three colleagues he's talking to are like, oh yeah, we gotta get, make this next deal, we gotta be killer. And he's just like, oh God, please, get me out of this. And he looks across the room and he sees this beautiful person and he's just like, oh, it's like crossing the desert to find this, this puddle of water. And when he goes to her and he finds out that she's a business person looking for Jack Trainer,
He's disappointed.
well, he's also like, I cannot let the business world infiltrate this fantasy that I'm having right now. So I don't think it was so much a manipulation, right? That's my point. I don't think it was a manipulation. I think it was designed to show that he just desperately wanted this pure fantasy to continue for a few moments longer.
I guess he does point out, he's like, you're the only one dressed like a woman.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, as Kathy just said, it's the 80s. Like, I mean, women are in corporate America are kind of, they have like these football player pads on and like there's this toughness almost to it to try and gain presence. And honestly, given where the social climate was at the time, it makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not aesthetic. I don't think people are pining to go back to the 80s for fashion as much, not this part of the 80s.
Yeah, and I think it makes that scene makes a very important point that if you were living in the 80s, I mean, I was young, right? I was still in college. I wasn't really in corporate America, but my mom was. And my mom, right, commuted from our house in Northern Virginia to Washington D.C. with her suit, right, and her sneakers, because that's what all the gals did when they rode the train. They didn't want to mess up their heels, so they had their sneakers on. And the point that I'm trying to make is that back then, the only way women were successful was to dress a certain way in corporate America. And when I say dress a certain way, I'm talking about dressing like, a little bit like a man.
Yep.
Which is why Catherine's character was so interesting, right? I mean, she didn't dress that way. I mean, you remember the cocktail party with the little
Red dress.
dim sum. She didn't dress that way, but she was definitely upper class. And you could tell she had, she probably had, degrees from every Ivy League, school there is. And you could just tell she was privileged. So she was privileged enough to be able to step out of that. But the sort of middle management types, if you were a woman and you wanted to make it and you didn't come from a place of privilege, you needed to put on your little suit, with your subdued makeup and your, no garish jewelry allowed, and you needed to present yourself like a man.
Yeah. And I think this movie just does a good job of giving you a window back into that. So you're right. We have come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but this was an interesting window back into that world. Now, in terms of the acting, it's interesting. Melanie Griffith, by far the lead actor, but she's third billed on this one. I thought that was an interesting thing. Just the weight of Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver get the top two billings. So, as you mentioned, this was her breakout, and she had come off of Body Double. And 20th Century Fox wanted a big-name actress to play Tess, but Mike Nichols pushed for Griffith until the studio ultimately gave in. So Mike Nichols, there were other considerations along the way. I've seen names that include Michelle Pfeiffer, Diane Lane, Sarah Jessica Parker, Brooke Shields, a number of other people. But Melanie Griffith somehow captured the gumption and like the spine of this character. Really liked how she played the role. Kathy, what about you?
Oh my God, yes, she was everything. And I just have to say, by the way, wasn't that just the genius of Mike Nichols? I mean, that's what he's, what he's renowned for is his ability to understand, first of all, how to get the best out of the actors and to know which actors are best for the part. I mean, you remember he directed an unknown Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah, I mean, there's no other person for Tess. I mean, it was, she had that gumption, but she was soft and beautiful like Marilyn Monroe, and but she had the baby voice, but you didn't question for 1 second that she was very smart and very capable. I can't imagine any other actress playing it after watching the movie. I've certainly felt that way at the time. In fact, I remember they came out with the Working Girl the series. It was just panned across the board. I never watched an episode of it because I just, first of all, it was an unknown Sandra Bullock playing Tess McGill in the series, a follow-up series, and it wasn't even intended for her. It was intended for Nancy McKeon. Remember Nancy McKeon from Facts of Life? It
Oh,
was
thank you.
supposed to
You
be
had to
her,
fill
and
that in
she
for
couldn't.
me. I know now.
Yeah, she couldn't do it, and they found Sandra Bullock, who was, nobody knew who Sandra Bullock was at the time, but the whole thing was just, what, no, there's no other Tess McGill. This was Melanie Griffith's character, start to finish. She did a great job, and she was just the perfect contrast to Sigourney Weaver. She was the perfect contrast to the robots, corporate America robots that she was interacting with, not only in Petty Marsh, but also in all the other corporate locations, and also at with the stockbrokers on the exchange. And she was also the perfect person to transform from this big hair, blue eyeshadow, Staten Island
Yeah.
woman to this, Park Avenue, simple hair and makeup person that she became, while still keeping this essence that only Melanie Griffith could bring to the part. I mean, I don't even really know how to explain it. But this was her role. I mean, there's no other question.
See, I'm giving Mike Nichols half credit here. Because you're right, Melanie Griffith was a great casting, but he also tried to cast Alec Baldwin as Jack Trainer.
No, thank you.
And he loses points majorly for that. Thankfully, the studio stepped in, and there's like, you are not casting two no-names for the starring role. Go get a big name. And he's like, all right, we'll go get the dude from Indiana Jones and Star Wars. How about that? Is that big enough for you?
Yeah.
I said, okay.
And isn't it funny that we have our two oh my God, what's his name? The Patriot Games.
Harrison Ford.
Oh, what is the name of
Jack
that
Ryan.
character? No, but what's the name of we have our two Jack Ryans, right?
Yes.
And I mean, that's
Yes.
that's actually
Didn't
great.
realize that.
It's
That's good.
you can tell. Yeah, and also, I mean, here's the thing with Alec Baldwin, right? To his credit, he's Mr. Oily, oily bohunk. That's a nice shout out to John Hughes and 16 Candles, but he's this oily bohunk. But he could have, you're right. I mean, he wasn't the right person for Jack Trainer, but he could have pulled it off, I think. And this was just a couple of years ahead of Red October.
Fair enough, though. Alec Baldwin was so good at being this horrible guy, Mick, which if this movie lays on anything a little bit thick, it's that Mick seemingly has no redeeming qualities to him at all. Like, he's awful. Like, he even got caught cheating, like, literally, like, very harshly, and he's just like, you're home early? Like, that...
Right. It was with one of her friends, and it just, yeah.
Like, I was just like, this guy's awful. And, like, he's, like, even earlier, he's like, yeah, pizza's cold. Like, I mean, he's gotten... He doesn't exhibit anything of any value. So the fact that she almost kind of like is even entertaining being nice to him again, even if her friend asked her to do it, I was sitting there going like, no.
Yeah, that was the worst proposal I've ever heard.
Well, yeah, and
He just keeps yelling at her to say yes. It's like, yep, that works with every single woman I've encountered. Just scream at them till they say yes.
well, but I think, and it probably doesn't work with any woman you've
No,
encountered, but
that
I
was
think
the
it
joke.
is a good, it's right. But I mean, if you think about back then in Staten Island of the 80s, women were sort of expected to just kind of put up with dudes like that. I mean, even if you think about Doreen, right? The guy that, the gal he was sleeping, she caught him in bed with this chick Doreen, right? And
No, she's very pleased with herself. She thinks she has a cat.
yeah, exactly. She's like, she's not even horrified at this man's behavior, and she's with him back, farther down into the movie when Sin finally gets married. She's his date, and it's just like, I think it speaks to the time, and also I hate to keep trying to say class, but that class of, that working class sort of culture back in the 80s in Staten Island. Women were just supposed to tolerate bullshit, that, right? Excuse me. Even Sin is saying to him, it's not like you to not give him a chance to make it up to you. And she's like, hello, I walked in on him having sex in our bed with somebody else, and you're acting like I'm being unreasonable at this point. And I think that was a huge statement about the way things were for women in that particular cultural group.
Nope, that's absolutely right. And so they laid it on thick in some ways, but to your point, and you're making me sit there and say, maybe it's not as thick. Maybe it's thick by today's standards, but even if you put yourself back then, maybe it's not as much of a two-dimensional character. So one of those other Staten Island guys back there was David Duchovny in the wedding scene, and so this is his first film screen debut, and he's rocking a little mini mullet. It's not as fierce as the Alec Baldwin mullet in this one, but I like that we get our first glimpse of David Duchovny here.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. Lots of good cameos.
And did you mention Melanie Griffith was a bit of a partier? She and Alec Baldwin did cause the production some trouble. They were partying in Manhattan late one night and wound up showing late for the shooting the next day, visibly intoxicated. And Mike Nichols, the producer, and producer Douglas Wick, were so freaked out that they decided to take drastic measures, and they started fining Melanie Griffith $80,000. And they made a nurse stay on hand to make sure that she had her sobriety intact for the remainder of the shoot. So, in fairness, there's a lot of money, particularly with New York film locations and stuff like this. It is not fun if somebody shows up to work and then they can't perform. There's a reason why Lindsay Lohan stopped getting work.
And she made a pass at Alec Baldwin, too. He wound up turning her down, but yeah, it sounded like she was just kind of disruptive, so they kind of had to give her the Des Bryant babysitting routine.
But it still didn't show in the end product. I guess they got it under control at the point. So I mean, I don't particularly detect sloppiness in any of the performance. So
no, not at all.
Chad, what about director Mike Nichols here? You were not on the Graduate episode, but are you a fan of Mike Nichols, the director, and of his work here?
I am going to have to duck because I know there's a lot of famous films in here. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Catch-22, Charlie Wilson's War.
Birdcage.
I have seen none of them. So
The Graduate. You've seen The Graduate, right?
Yes, I have, and I like it quite a bit more than Brian Fry. So I do like that. It's probably wrongly billed as a comedy, and it's very frustrating given my last name. My wife had that stupid song sung to her quite a bit, but it's a good movie and definitely recommend it.
Other good Harrison Ford movie that comes 3 years after this one is Regarding Henry.
Haven't seen it.
It's a touching movie. It's a good one as well. So, okay, so smaller sample for you, but do you like Mike Nichols as a director here?
Yeah, the only thing, and I don't know if it was just an issue with, so I purchased this off of Amazon to watch, and it had some weird cuts. Like there was one specific one that sticks in my mind of Tess was trying on lingerie for Mick, and she's talking about she wishes she could wear something else. And it just abruptly cuts to the point where I thought, is there something wrong with my movie? And I rewound it. My wife was probably thinking I'm rewinding it for entirely different reasons. But then the second time, it's just like, oh, that was a weird transition. And there were a couple of those. So I raised my eyebrow of, is this just an Amazon issue, or is this actually how the movie goes?
Is that your excuse for the vacuum cleaning naked scene as well?
No, that did not get rewound.
Okay,
but yeah, she was in lingerie and underwear a lot. I don't know if this was 80s and they're just trying to give something for the men to watch as well, or what what that was. Maybe there was a broader, more important meaning for that, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kathy, what about you? Where are you and Mike Nichols as a director?
Oh, he's more my scene, right? Loved the Birdcage, regarding Henry. My big favorites were The Graduate, Postcards from the Edge, and Working Girl. And Heartburn, because I love Nora Ephron anyway. And this was basically based on Nora Ephron's marriage to uh, the Nixon reporter. Oh, what's his name? Woodward and Bernstein. Bob Woodward. So loved Heartburn. And I love that Mike Nichols was sort of famous for building relationships with actors, and working with them over and over again. And two of my favorite Meryl Streep movies, Postcards from the Edge, and the Nora Ephron movie Heartburn. Sorry. And so two of my favorite Meryl Streep movies happen to be Mike Nichols movies as well.
I'm rapidly becoming a fan of his. The ones I've seen I like. He does have a good tendency to tell a good story with a lot of emphasis on the characters, and develops those characters very well. And that is good storytelling from the director's standpoint. And I don't think of him as a guy with a style, but I do think of him with a very strong ability to convey character in his work. And to your point, you mentioned earlier, Kathy, I think he gets the right butts in the seats for who to embody these characters. So I really do agree with you. I think Mike Nichols is great, and I want to dive in more on some of these. Some of these that you're mentioning, I've not seen some of them myself, and I want to go farther.
Yeah, I recommend pretty much. Obviously The Graduate, but any member of any movie in his lineup. And people forget about the movie that was sort of based on Clinton.
Charlie Wilson's War?
No. The Primary Colors. It's timeless because it's the same, talking about issues that are still very much in the minds of people today.
I did think that Nichols did a good job, to your point, of capturing the Staten Island versus Manhattan differences, as well as the high society that Catherine was in at her apartment and Tessa's world. So I think that he does a really good job of staking out the different environments, the pit that she was in, working with Oliver Platt's character in the beginning. I liked the wedding that you see, the engagement party scene that you see. You really see that Staten Island world that she's in. And to your point, and you stole it from me, I was really proud of this one, but you came out right away with this one. You're right. Mike Nichols really lingers on the ferry. She's studying on their way home from that. She's looking at the city in inspiration. And, even as she's thinking like she lost her job, they show the background fuzzed out as if it's fading from her and she's lost this, as she has to go shamefully back to Staten Island. And they use it as a transition part so many times. And, you're probably sitting there thinking like, man, like this guy likes ferries. But it has a lot of that is, to me, one of the biggest directorial style changes and tools that he uses in his bag on this one.
Oh yeah, it's her transport between the two worlds, and it's so beautifully visualized. And I may have misunderstood because it was the beginning of the podcast, but when they at the end when they pulled away, right, from Tessa's window, right, from her office window, and you basically saw, that she was one of a few hundred windows in this very large tall skyscraper in Manhattan. I think Chad made a point about, just another run of the mill cubicle, but I think it was saying something different. She finally has a window,
yeah.
Right? She never had a window before. She has a window now. Right. So that's what that scene told me. Although I agree with Chad about how it's like, oh, yeah. So it was like, oh, don't suck me into this, this robotic mess that these people are, 50 hours a week.
I think it was just this triumphant song singing about New Jerusalem with a gospel choir, and I see cubicle and I'm like, oh, this is crushing my soul. I get it. Glass ceilings have been shattered, but your triumph is four walls.
Yeah. No, but I think the key there, I agree with everything that you say, but I do think the key there is that she got a window.
Yeah.
That used to be a big deal. Like now offices, again, they're much kinder to their workers. The workers valued more now, but Coming off of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's still around in the 80s, things are very hierarchical. And you can see that throughout this movie. Like, look at the room that the Orrin Trask is meeting in and compare that to, like, the pit that she's in at the beginning of this movie, or that Joan Cusack, where she receives her phone call at the end of the movie. It's quite contrasting. And to your point, Chad, I don't think, knowing you, and you're not a big fan of this absolute vibrant energy that Manhattan has, and so you see the people moving through and at a very rapid pace. This is kind of a magical fairy tale like for the rest of the country, not so much the rest of the world, but the fact that you get to work on a boat, a subway, and there's that many people. It's not typical of the American working experience, and there is something almost romantic about it, and Mike Nichols does use that as an elevated device in this. So
oh man, I've worked for a New York company with New York employees, and the culture is, like you said, it's very, very different. Their scheduling is different. How they approach the workday is different. And it just, with the Pittsburgh culture of working, it is just butting heads all the time. So that style and that workflow is just, it's almost traumatic.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hear the discomfort in your voice. It's like a chair you don't want to sit in anymore.
Yes. I left that company for good reason.
Yeah, and I mean, didn't you? And just speaking, I mean, this is sort of not really related, but it sort of is. But I just loved the whole jungle atmosphere of the stock exchange, right? That whole the open her where she worked in the opening scenes.
Yeah.
Cutthroat jungle, chaos. Every man for himself. It was just so very well portrayed with just 2 minutes of film.
Transitioning into location a little bit, though, as we keep talking about these things, I really liked seeing the skyline with the Twin Towers in there. It's prominently displayed. Like, you will never see New York again in that way. And while this movie is a good still frame of culturally corporate America at this time for women, it's also a great snapshot of New York at this time, because New York has continued to change and evolve. And just to see that skyline at this point in time, I always love seeing prominent cities, of which New York is, at these different points in history, and it really has evolved. So that was fun too.
Yeah, I mean, they even used the World Trade Center lobby, so you get to see that.
Yep.
For one of the last times.
It was a great snapshot of a time that's very much gone, for sure.
Now, that was the good news. The bad news is, can we talk about the hair a little bit here? Kathy, you were there at the time. Like, I mean, do you have a more sympathetic view on these things, or is it just Staten Island took this 80s stuff and took it up to another extreme?
It was 80s Staten Island style. And I mean, I love, so we didn't all, I mean, in the 80s, I was in Northern Virginia, technically, which is part of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So I was in the suburbs of D.C., and we certainly didn't, I mean, we had bigger hair. And yes, our makeup was a little bit different than it would be today, but no, that was Staten Island's take on the 80s. And I loved the contrast and how it was woven into the script, into the story, in subtle but very effective ways. Just that conversation between Catherine and Tess on Catherine's first day, getting to know each other. I'm not, I'm not in a meeting, I'm unavailable, or whatever she said. And, oh, and by the way, we have a uniform, right? And she didn't say, "You're garish. You look like you just fell off the boat." She said it more, more effectively and more subtly. How do I look? You look great, but you could rethink your jewelry. And that scene was so telling. And then she goes into the bathroom where, this is not the executive restroom, right? She's back in the bathroom with all the secretaries, right? And she's pulling her, wiping off her makeup, pulling her jewelry off. And there were multiple scenes like that really showed, effectively how she was crossing over from one class to another by simply changing the way she presents herself. There was so much visually in this movie, like I said, about how women had to present themselves in corporate America, how lower class, working class women presented themselves versus, executive women in corporate America. Just it was just visually so wonderful. And you think about all the scenes that talked about her evolution into this corporate, understanding what she needed to do to present herself differently. The scene about, where you were talking about, it's not even leather.
Yeah, that was a good line.
She picks this she picks this dress, and Sin is like, there are no bows, where are the bows? And she's like, no, it's, you have to, it has to be simple, elegant. I just appreciate how effective those handful of scenes were in helping us understand how important how she presented herself was to what she was trying to accomplish.
Now, Chad, I know for you and for I, this is more of a jolt. Like the cool stuff, like even once she's simplified, it still seems like a lot by today's standards. Like, I mean, we look at Catherine, who's just like the pinnacle of style. Like she walks in a room and commands all the attention. And or even like I thought the ski gear and stuff like that and everything that she had like on the ski slope, like this is all state of the art. And I'm sitting there going like, that's a really goofy ski get up, you know. So like but what from a modern day standpoint of just getting this now in 2021, what is your take on the aesthetics of all these things? Like how does it feel like it's playing for you?
I mean, for me, I kind of enjoyed it because I knew how much it hurt you. So I'm watching this with glee, like, oh, Russell is twitching wherever he is watching this movie right now. It's just one synthesizer away from doing you in. And I never got that, but the soundtrack was actually pretty good. We'll talk about it in a second. But yeah, I mean, we've said it all about the 80s. It's not great. It's not a great fashion time, and coupled with the Staten Island aesthetic, like just not enjoyable. You can mock it a little bit. It's ridiculous what people went through at that point in time, you know, the high hair and everything. My mom just did the perm, but that was her lasting effect from the 80s. But yeah, the huge hair, the ridiculous makeup, particularly on Sin, you know, the bangles, everything, just, it's loud. The 80s were a loud time.
I just think it's one of those things where I think it's really funny. The people at the top, or the cool, like cool, expensive 80s stuff, to me still doesn't seem very cool, chic, or anything like that. You go back to the 50s and 60s, like high-end corporate America then seems very, very dignified comparatively, and it still seems to hold up in some ways. But there's something about the 80s where like the ostentatious times, we saw this in the Coming to America episode as well, where like it's just like, whew, that's a lot. And yes, you have money, but it doesn't play like that today. So it is funny, like when Sigourney Weaver walks in the room, like she's the apple of everybody's eye. It is quite a bit of difference than like if you know, if you were to make that movie today, I think it would just play very differently. So it's one of those things where I almost needed little captions on there at times. It's just like, you know, she's considered a knockout by all measures of this time. It's like, oh, okay, yes, thank you. Okay, thank you. I needed that.
Well, but I mean, did you really need that footnote though? Because I mean, I think they did a really good job. And I mean, Catherine did something different, right? She was an executive, but she dressed like a very privileged upper class woman, and she had style. Like to your point, she had style, and she wasn't garish or ostentatious at all. She looked great. I mean, do you think that she would not have been able to be plucked out of the 80s and put into some other
Well, I'll give you a for
era
instance.
and look as
Jack
good?
Trainer walks into Tessa's office, or it's actually Catherine's office, but Tessa's sitting behind the desk, and she's got these pink, like really large pink tinted framed glasses with pink tinted lenses, and it is one of those things where it's like I'm sorry, can you take those off while we're talking?
We're trying to have a serious
like,
conversation.
it's almost like if I walked in like with Groucho glasses and like I've got something very serious to tell you.
Yeah, those large plastic frames were kind of common in the 80s, but I think, you would not yeah, I mean that yes, the glasses, yeah, you got me on that one, but I think otherwise Catherine, walking into a room, especially in that opening scene where she comes off the elevator, I mean she was regal and she looked really good. I think her look would play in various other eras.
And you're
Very
right.
well.
The acting and the directing all reinforce this. So I'm not literally saying I need a footnote on there. I'm just making a joke of like some of these things that are like, oh, she's sophisticated now with my large pink glasses. Like it's just like yeah, that was a strange call still. Like, but yeah, soundtrack. This is Mike Nichols does what he does in The Graduate, and he takes "Let a River Run" by Carly Simon, and he uses it over and over and over again, but effectively. Did you like the soundtrack here, Kathy?
Yeah, and I mean this was, this is a huge this was an anthem, right? And this was a huge hit for Carly Simon. It resonated with women. It was just a good song, period. I mean, if you like that kind of music, if you're a Carly Simon fan, it hit all the marks.
Honestly, you could go in a lot of worse directions. A lot of 80s movies, to Chad's point earlier, have this ridiculous cheapening synthesizer stuff. I felt like there was...
You take that back.
I felt like this was actually, it captured the power of those moments of on the ferry and stuff like that. That big full choir, like they needed you to hit you with an emotional, hit. We don't want to hear like something the equivalent of like, open the door, get on the floor, everybody doing the dinosaur. Like I don't need that.
Yeah, I mean that's what I meant by, I mean it is an 80s women's anthem. I mean it's not even a song. I mean, yeah, it hit all the marks. It was perfect for the movie. It was a big hit. I mean, heck, it's been featured in so many other movies, and in fact there was a Murphy movie where she was obsessed with Carly Simon and obsessed with this song and obsessed with Working Girl. And it was like her goals, right? What is it that what do the kids do today? Vision boards or something?
Yeah.
I mean it was icon. This song is iconic, and its relationship to this movie is iconic. That's why it won. There's no other movie or song that could have won the Academy Award for best movie song, because it did everything a movie song was supposed to do.
No, it was great. I can't say the same for Lady in Red at the wedding scene. I was like, can we just tone that down in the background just a little bit? Like you're hitting me with it really hard right now. Chad, what about you?
That's what all the kids in Staten Island were listening to when they did their slow dancing, though, back then.
I don't think I want to live in Staten Island in the 80s. That's just, you're painting a picture more and more. I don't think that I want to be there at this point. But Chad, what about you for the soundtrack?
Yeah, I mean, we should absolutely go to a male for his opinion on a woman's anthem. I like the song. Kathy's made me like it better because it's added a lot more meaning for me, but I wanted more 80s. Like, if we're going to have a period piece here, and I know that's probably not what they were setting out to do, but it's very 80s. I want more of the 80s soundtrack. I want, we heard I'm so excited in the background at one point, but I want the synthesizers. I want the cheese in there. Maybe not to the point of spoiling the movie, but enough to make Russell kind of cranky.
Okay.
Oh, so that's what I couldn't figure out what you guys were talking about. So you were saying that you wanted more of that because it's so bad. It's like it's so bad it's good. Is that kind of what you were going?
Oh, I enjoy it.
Chad likes this 80s music stuff. Like we have this ongoing thing. It just, you can tell it throughout the episodes that we've been on in the past. Like I don't like the cheesy 80s music. And there's other parts of the 80s that I can tolerate, but I mean the music in particular. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it'll really hurt a movie, like particularly like a comedy movie or something like that. Like all of a sudden you're hit with this rough music, and it continues into the early 90s too. So I mean, it's just something of the era. And this movie did not cheapen itself with its music. So Chad and I split on both sides of the fence on this one again. I like this music. It has emotional punch, and I want punch, and I don't want to go with the I don't want Duran.
Aww.
But Mike Nichols
improves every movie.
Mike Nichols was going to put in Witchy Woman as the opening credits from the Eagles.
That would have been great.
Cyndi Lauper is working on a musical version of Working Girl, so she's coming off of her critically acclaimed Kinky Boots run on Broadway, and so this will be her second musical, and I'd see that. I'm excited. So it's not just for Bob's Burgers anymore. Cyndi Lauper's getting in the act and actually making a musical for Working Girl. So something to look forward to. You mentioned there's only one Tess McGill. Do you have room in your heart, Kathy, for a Broadway Tess McGill?
Yeah. Anything but that series. I didn't, like I said, and it could have been, just, yeah, anything but that series. I think we've got enough, we have enough decades between Melanie Griffith and this revival if it happens. So I'm up for it.
Okay. Now, we ready to hand some awards? Right.
Absolutely.
Kathy, give us the honor. Who's your MVP of Working Girl?
So, with all due respect to my Sigourney Weaver and my darling Joan Cusack, who stole every scene she was in, this is Melanie Griffith's movie.
I second that. Chad, what about you?
Oh man, you know me and villains. I went straight for Sigourney Weaver. She's manic, she's conniving, and she's just a fun kind of evil. I really enjoyed her, and I wanted her in more of the scenes. She made me smile every time she was there. Interestingly,
she does relish in like the mean things she's doing.
Yeah, my wife didn't like her. She's like, "What was up with that weird acting?" I was like, "No, this is great, and she was nominated for awards. You are wrong."
Well, what about this? What about when she says, "Well, I am, after all, me"?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
It was like a channeled Cruella de Vil, later on Devil Wears Prada type evil boss. I loved it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, maybe Meryl Streep took a little bit of influence from this. You never know. Maybe so. Yeah, it's a similar type of role, but yeah. Best Supporting Actor, Kathy.
Oh, Joan Cusack.
Oh, I love it.
I can't say Sigourney Weaver because she's not even really, she's one of the leads. So supporting actor, Joan. My buddy.
That's a great choice. And she got nominated as well for awards for her performance. And she was absolutely embodied the Staten Island excessiveness for sure.
Yes.
Chad, who's your best supporting?
I went with Philip Bosco's Oren Trask. I actually thought he was really well cast. He seemed warm, but he still had that authoritative air about him. So his scenes could have gone really poorly, but I thought he did a great job with them.
Great pick. I agree with Kathy, but I have to give Sigourney Weaver a nod in some way, shape, or form. So I'm saying that this is a supporting role and putting her in. She's just such a good villain. Very good villain. Yeah. So
she is. I almost felt guilty for not having any awards go to Sigourney, but then she is, after all, her.
And that's why there's three of us.
We can't feel too sorry for her.
Yeah, there's three of us here. We'll collectively give everybody their due, probably. But who's your hidden gem, Kathy?
I'm torn between saying like Olympia Dukakis, just because she's
Yes.
lightened it for a bit, and she was, I don't know if you guys even know who Olympia Dukakis is, but back in the 80s she was the great character actor, right, that everybody just loved, right? You might know her from like Steel Magnolias. That was a bigger role for her, but or Moonstruck. But anyway, I'm torn between her and Alec Baldwin, but I got to give it to Alec Baldwin.
Was she related to Michael Dukakis?
Yes, that's her cousin.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I did not put all that together, so thank you for telling me that one. So, Chad, who's your hidden gem?
I think I'm going to go with Kevin Spacey, who just really went out of his comfort zone to play a sexual predator.
See, I'm so glad somebody is going to pick Kevin Spacey for this one.
Yeah.
In reality, though, I mean, they called him and like he learned his lines on the way over to rehearsal. Like the guy that was initially cast for Bob Speck just backed out. So Kevin Spacey to save the day, I guess.
He was a good actor. There's no doubt about it. So, I mean...
Was he acting?
Yeah. I don't mean in this role, but I mean the fact that he could come in and put it all together that fast, that doesn't honestly surprise me, but that is a good choice. I'm going to make Brian Fry a happy guy because he just loves this guy. Oliver Platt, who played Lutz, who was a sleazoid pimp. And
That's right.
He just really did embody that. Recasts. Now, if you had to take somebody in the movie and put somebody else in their place, who would it be, Kathy?
I could probably, if I had another minute, come up with a couple of other better known actors who would have done a good job with the Trask role, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about that. Chad, how about you? Who are you recasting?
I'm still stunned that there were awards that Harrison Ford didn't get from you. But I'm recasting Joan Cusack, sorry Kathy, with Catherine Hahn. She'd be too young for this movie, but maybe in the remake, I think Catherine Hahn would be a great Cindy.
I love Catherine Hahn, but yeah, I really liked this cast, and I had a hard time finding somebody that I could recast. So I just did it just to do it. I thought Marissa Tomei would step in for Joan Cusack. Perhaps, well, there's only a 2 years difference between the two of them, and I think they're both awesome. So replacing one awesome actor with another awesome actor. So, do you think about who you'd put in Trask's spot, Kathy?
Well, I mean, and somebody fun like Bob Hoskins maybe
Okay.
would have been would have brought a fun little element to Trask. But not to say that Philip Bosco. I'm not saying he didn't do a great job. I'm just, we could have had some fun with that.
I kind of want to hear someone like J.K. Simmons go, "You're fired."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Is he too young for that? But that's actually a good backup choice too.
Best shot of the movie, Kathy.
I mean, again, and I don't know if I'm saying this just because I feel like, Sigourney Weaver just was elegant and commanding and just gorgeous in the 80s, notwithstanding the decade. But when she burst into the conference room at Trask Industries
Nice.
with her
Yeah.
tall gorgeousness and the crutch and the broken leg, and she still looked awesome.
Yeah, she almost took out that person at the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, just everything about that, just the visual.
She's tall. She has a commanding presence. You're right.
She sure does, and she's beautiful, and and just the way she was dressed, everything.
Now, Chad, best shot for you.
I'm going the opposite direction with Sigourney Weaver, and it was just this Looney Tunes type shot, and it's the lingering shot after Catherine has her accident. I thought it was really comedic and well done that they just stayed on this dead air as you hear her scream in the background, just it reminded me very much of Wile E. Coyote falling off a cliff.
I did get a good laugh out of that. So that's a great pick there.
That was a good one, yeah.
I'm going to go with Tess on the ferry early in the movie as she's studying while she's coming home. This shows the hardworking backbone that the character's coming from. And I could have picked any number of ferry scenes, as we've mentioned many times on this, but this one to me shows that she's studying it late at night while coming home, and she gives everything she has into making it. That captures the character for me. And a close runner-up for the wedding scene when she's dancing with Orrin Trask, and the camera's spinning, and you're changing which face you see as to who's talking. It's really well done. The conversation is flowing there, and as she's kind of taking him for a dance, and she's leading him and guiding him to be able to get another meeting so that they can be heard at the higher level. So I thought the camera work reinforced what the characters were doing really strongly there.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because of all the scenes, that one was the one. That whole wedding, not just that one scene, but the whole wedding concept of them kind of crashing his daughter's wedding, it walked a fine line. It could have been hokey and unbelievable and dumb. But, because, really, how are you going to go in and get a meeting with this guy at his daughter's wedding and not get caught? But they pulled it off. And that scene, where they were dancing that you just mentioned, was a big reason why that whole concept of crashing the wedding worked in a movie that was, didn't have those kinds of sort of implausible, scenes like that.
It had a good moment too when Harrison Ford realizes, oh crap, we're not invited, and he grabs 2 drinks and quickly takes one out and then takes another one out.
Well, and I love everything about that scene because, again, and I have, Harrison Ford is just, my God, we all, this is Harrison Ford's world and we're just living in it, right? So, he didn't get any awards from us, but let's just take a moment to just say how just awesome Harrison Ford is. But I think the scene where, he's panicked, right? So he's just sucking down this cocktail, and you can just see all the women around him just swooning, because that's just what he was. He was Mr. Swoon.
He was getting looks at the wedding. I noticed that on my second watch. I was all the ladies ooh.
Yeah, that's that. If that doesn't say all you need to say about Harrison Ford,
and he could just go up to a woman he had never seen before and say, "Don't break my heart by not dancing with me." She didn't even think twice.
She was powerless. She wasn't
gonna be I don't know you.
Powerless.
It doesn't matter. It's don't care about your name. Yes, gonna dance.
Yep. That's right. Doesn't matter who you are. Powerless.
Now, best scene in the movie, Kathy.
I love the release that came from after they got back from their initial pitch meeting with, Trask was listening in. Oh, how does he know? He knows everything. I love the release of them run, running down the stairs and just, oh, like we did it. And by the way, I love you. And how that sort of stairs scene sort of segued nicely into the romance part of the movie.
Yeah, just
I liked that, and I loved the scene with at the end with her secretary. If you don't mind, I prefer assistant, because there's triumph there. But I think probably too. Actually, I take all of that back. Those are great scenes, but I think my favorite scene is when Jack didn't hesitate to say in front, facing basically the end of his career. And, this is the guy who, 40 minutes prior was talking about the little pieces of tape on the phone. And how you can lose everything in a second. One bad deal is all it takes. And in the face of all of that, he stood across from, the elevator, basically knowing that he was going to, he was kissing his career goodbye. And he said, no, I will not turn my back on her. This is her deal. That's my favorite scene.
That's a great one. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great one. Chad, what about you? Best scene?
we covered it extensively, but the wedding crashing scene, just Jack being nervous but buying in and getting that information to help Tess out, and the way she's manipulating the room as well. I just like that before they weren't really sure of each other, but all of a sudden there's just buy-in and they become a team.
That's a great choice there. I like the scene where, so Tess is mad that she was sent to a fake meeting, which turned out to be a hookup, and she came back to David Lutz. And we've mentioned it a couple times, but she wrote, David Lutz is a sleazoid pimp with a tiny little penis on the jumbo crawl, and everybody at the office was just laughing. I just love people who don't take crap off of other people, and, you know, you're going to get the upper hand. You think you've got authority on me, and you think you can make me look bad, but it just... There's something that's so, I don't know, it's just very punk rock. I love this character, and whether it be crashing weddings, again, breaking the rules to doing what needs to be done. Yeah, I loved all of that. I really like this character. So that to me, right off the bat, made me sit there and go like, yeah. I'm in. Like you got me hooked. Let's see where this is going. So.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because it was in the beginning. It's set the stage. Yeah, I agree. It's a wonderful scene in that it was just satisfactory. You know, it's satisfying because he was a prick, a pimp, sleazy, and it was satisfying in that respect. And it was also perfect to set the stage for what we could expect from the character. Yeah.
Now, best wardrobe and makeup moment. It's hard to narrow it down, this one. Kathy, what is your favorite moment?
It's not even leather. It's not even leather.
That's really great.
Perfect.
Especially after we see the chandelier come down, and they're like, why does it do that?
For cleaning.
Oh. Yeah. Now, Chad, best wardrobe and makeup moment.
Yep, same thing. Her dress at the party scene.
Yep. All right. And I'm going to go with Joan Cusack's 80s hair and eyeshadow, like in earrings. I mean, if there was a human being that literally most resembled a morph between a peacock and a human, this is it. Yeah. Now, change one thing, Kathy.
I want to see her do something evil to Mick. Something. Just like some kind of, I don't want to change the course of what happened eventually, because I do think that it demonstrated what women were basically expecting from dudes that they might meet in Staten Island.
That's in her character to say, like, I'm not taking this crap. You're right. She's a lot more kind to him, of just like, you know, like, I wish you hadn't done that, is kind of the tone.
Yeah, something like what she did to Lutz. Just sneak that in there just for our satisfaction, and then keep everything the same.
Put a hole in his boat.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to go full Carrie Underwood on this boat, but I mean, yeah, I don't know, but that's a great point. That's a good one. Chad, what about you? What's your change one thing?
I think you've got to move Harrison Ford to the couch after that drunken night. Like, you can't call him a gentleman while having him sleep, at least shirtless. He might have been naked, we don't know, next to a passed out drunk woman. Like, that seemed a little too far. Like,
so you need the Roman holiday treatment where Gregory Peck is a total gentleman to Audrey Hepburn then.
Yes. Yeah, like not even touching her, flipping the mattress so she goes onto the bunk. Yeah, that was a great scene in Roman Holiday. But yeah.
Well, actually, he wasn't a total gentleman. You're right. He put her on the, he put her on the couch and he took the bed for himself. And then she woke up. She's like, where was I? He's like, I put you in the bed.
But yeah, I couldn't tell if he was naked or shirtless, but that's just weird. Like,
yeah.
Go to the couch, dude.
All right. And my change one thing is, you know what? I think you've talked me out of it because the excessiveness of Staten Island. I had written down big hair, but you know what? I think I might back off my point on that one now. Yeah, pink glasses. That's my new thing. Sorry.
Yeah, but can I just add to that, if I may, on Catherine?
Yeah.
The big glasses, the big reading glasses on Catherine, because on Tess you're just like, oh, they were probably left over. She didn't have time to get fancy, elegant glasses. But on Catherine, it seemed weird.
There's an easy flow chart for this. Is your name Elton John? Yes, you can wear those glasses. No. No.
I love it. That's that diagram needs to be drawn up. Best quote of the movie, Kathy.
Can I give you a runner-up?
You can get a nod, yeah.
Yeah, so the runner-up is, of course, the one that a lot of people talk about. I have a head for business and a bod for sin. Another runner-up is the people talk a lot about is Sin, when she said, "Look, I can sing and dance in my house in my underwear all day long. Doesn't make me Madonna, never will." But my favorite was when Harrison Ford, they were at that little business meet and greet cocktail party, and he said, when we met, we would drink tequila.
Yeah.
It was so smooth, right? And he's ad-libbing, he's making this stuff up as he goes along. And that's how he got her to take a shot with him.
All right. Yeah, now Chad,
very smooth.
What about you? Best quote?
Going with the Sigourney Weaver quote. Tess, you don't get anywhere in this world by waiting for what you want to come to you. You make it happen. Watch me, Tess. Learn from me.
Well, she took her advice on that one, so that's a very good foreshadowing on that. So I'm going to go with Mick being like, "Tess, will you marry me?" And she just goes, "Maybe." And he's like, "I think I deserve an answer." And she's like, "If you want another answer, ask another girl."
Yeah, burn.
There you go.
Just picturing Ashton Kutcher. Burn.
Yeah. I hate the character of Mick so much. So, but I didn't. Yeah. So that to me was the But you're right. It wasn't. She held back comparatively what she did in the rest of her life, for sure. So, Kathy, one more recommendation for where we can hear more from you in the very near future.
I'm about to drop a podcast, so this podcast is gonna go live, I think, in time for Valentine's Day. Later on this spring, I'm gonna drop my podcast, and it'll be called the National Trumpeter. I am the National Trumpeter, and I advocate for mental health awareness, exploring the complexities of human behavior for the betterment of all of us. So keep your eye out for that where you find podcasts.
Very exciting. It's ambitious, and I like what you're doing there. So hope you spread some good information with that one. So.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of dialogue about how we can do better with what we observe coming from our fellow man.
All right. Now, this is the big climax here. On a 5-star scale, half-star intervals, Kathy, what would you give Working Girl?
It's a 5-star movie for me. Yeah.
All right. And Chad, what about you?
I'm going to go with a 3-star. I enjoyed it. I'm sorry.
You're tough.
Yeah. I like less heavy themes, but it was a good movie and I'd recommend it.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to go with a 4.5 on this one. You probably can tell I just was a big fan of this movie, and I will be watching this one again in the future. I just like underdog stories, and before it's anything else, to me, it's first and foremost an underdog story.
Very nice.
Chad, do you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
I would love to, sir.
We're going to go right up your aisle here with post-apocalyptic dystopian futures. So
excellent.
Yeah. Option number 1, Brazil from 1985. A bureaucratic in a dystopic society becomes an enemy of the state as he pursues a woman of his dreams. Option 2, Blade Runner from 1982. A Blade Runner must pursue and terminate 4 replicants who stole a ship in space and have returned to Earth to find their creator. Option 3, A Clockwork Orange from 1971. In a future, sadistic gang leader is imprisoned and volunteers for a conduct aversion experiment, but it doesn't go as planned.
How can you not choose Blade Runner here? It's got to be Blade Runner.
All right, double helping of Harrison Ford. I will never argue that.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
Hey, no one will, right? February is Harrison Ford month.
I
somewhere.
would sign up. Yes, keep that going.
Yes.
So,
He's never had a bad movie. 40 Days and 40 Nights.
6 days, 7 nights, Chad.
He's awesome.
Oh, yeah, different movie.
Yeah. I love that scene in Fanboys.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kathy, for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on the show. You were a great guest.
Yes, thank you.
I loved chatting with you guys about my favorite movie from the 80s.
Thank you, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We do want to hear from you, so subscribe, rate, and review to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. Those ratings and reviews help make the show better and help get us out to other people, so that's the number one thing you can do to help the show. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us at Twitter at @movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. We're on Instagram. And producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free, so we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page. And we always thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Chad?
You're a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot. So I have a few faults. Who doesn't?